The sound of boots echoed through the concrete hallway of the Navy Training Center in Coronado. Fresh recruits lined up, trying to look serious, though some could barely hide their smirks. If this clip got you curious, the full story is waiting for you. Links in the description and in the comments below. At the far end of the hallway, an old man with a faded uniform and a limp walked slowly toward them. His hair was white, his face weathered like old leather, and his right hand shook slightly as he adjusted his cap. "This is our instructor?" one of the recruits whispered. "Man looks like he fought in World War II. Another muttered, drawing quiet laughter from the line. The old man stopped in front of them. His eyes were pale gray, the kind that seemed to see through people. He looked over the recruits, one by one, his silence heavier than any shout. "You think I'm too old to teach you?" he finally said, voice calm but razor-sharp. No one replied. He pointed to the one who had laughed the loudest, a tall, confident recruit named Mason. "You, step forward." Mason swallowed and obeyed. "What's your name, son?" "Mason, sir." The instructor nodded. "Well, Mason, since I'm old, maybe you can show me how to handle a simple push-up session. Let's see what young strength looks like." Mason grinned. "Yes, sir." The rest of the recruits chuckled quietly, but within 2 minutes, Mason's face turned red, his arms trembling. The old man's voice stayed calm. "Keep going. Don't stop because you're tired. Stop because you've given everything." At 35 push-ups, Mason collapsed. The old man knelt beside him. Strength is nothing without endurance, and endurance is nothing without purpose. He stood up straight, his limp barely noticeable now. "You'll learn both here, or you'll quit." Then he said quietly, "They called me Chief Hawley. Once upon a time, I was the last man standing in Fallujah." The laughter in the hall vanished. Even the air felt heavier. Mason looked up from the floor, sweat dripping, eyes wide. "Fallujah, sir? You mean..." Chief Howard nodded slowly. "The second battle?" 2004. The recruits stared at him in silence. They suddenly realized the man they had mocked was not just an instructor. He was a living legend. And his scars had names. That night, the recruits sat in their barracks, whispering about Chief Howard. Most of them had heard of the Battle of Fallujah, but only from documentaries or dusty history books. None of them ever imagined their gray-haired instructor had been there. Mason couldn't sleep. He kept replaying Hale's words. "They called me Chief Howell. Once upon a time, I was the last man standing in Fallujah." The next morning, Hawley gathered them outside in the training yard before sunrise. The sky was still dark, and the Pacific wind cut sharp against their faces. "You're here to learn how to be warriors," Hawley began, pacing slowly, his limp visible but unbothering. "But warriors aren't built from muscle. They're built from loss." He pointed toward the ocean. "That water doesn't care who you are. It'll break you the same way war does. I'll teach you to face both." The recruits dove into surf torture, cold waves crashing over them as they lay side by side in the freezing sand. Some gritted their teeth. Others whimpered quietly, but Howard stood beside them the entire time, the water soaking his old boots. When one recruit cried out, "Sir, how long do we stay in this, sir?" Howard simply said, "Until you stop fighting it. You can't conquer the sea, only yourself." Hours later, when they finally stumbled back to the shore, Mason found himself staring at Hale's leg, the one that limped. There was a jagged scar running from the knee down. Mason hesitated before asking, "Sir, did you get that in Fallujah?" Hawley looked at him for a long moment. "That and everything else I lost." He turned his gaze toward the horizon. "We went into that city as a team of 6. We came out with 1. The recruits went silent. Mason couldn't stop watching him, the way Hale's hands trembled when he spoke. The faraway look in his eyes, as if part of him was still there. In that ruined city. That evening, Mason walked into the empty training hall and found Hal sitting alone, staring at a small photograph, 6 men in combat gear, smiling despite the dust and chaos around them. "Those were my brothers," Hawley said softly. not looking up. Every single one of them braver than me, but fate. It decided I should be the one to carry their stories. He placed the photo face down. That's what age is, Mason. It's not weakness. It's memory. Mason's throat tightened. I'm sorry for laughing at you, sir. Chief Holloway gave a faint smile. Don't be. Every soldier starts with arrogance. Only a few end with understanding. He stood slowly, placing a firm hand on Mason's shoulder. Tomorrow, we start Hell Week. I'll see if you have what it takes to carry your own story someday. By dawn, Hell Week had begun. The recruits had barely slept, their bodies already aching from the previous days. But Chief Hale's voice cut through the early mist like a blade. Up! Move! They sprinted to the beach, the Pacific roaring under a blood-red sunrise. The air was cold enough to sting their lungs. Welcome to Hell Week, Hawley said, his voice calm, almost gentle. 5 days. No rest, no mercy, no pretending. The recruits groaned but obeyed. They carried logs through the sand, crawled under barbed wire, dove into the freezing surf again and again. Hawley didn't shout. He didn't need to. His presence alone kept them moving. At one point, a recruit collapsed. Hawley knelt beside him, his voice low. You can quit if you want, but if you do, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering who you could have been. The boy gritted his teeth and stood. Hale's faint smile was almost invisible in the mist. Hours later, during a rest moment, if you could call it that, Mason finally asked the question everyone wanted to know. Sir, what happened in Fallujah? The question froze the air. Even the waves seemed to hush. Hall stared at the ocean for a long time before speaking. We were a 6-man SEAL team sent in to extract a trapped Marine platoon. The city was burning, every building a death trap. We fought house to house, room to room. He paused, jaw tightening. We made it to the platoon, got them out. But while covering their retreat, we were ambushed. 5 of my men never made it. His voice cracked just for a second. I stayed behind. Took out the ones who cornered us. When reinforcements found me 3 days later, I'd lost a leg, most of my hearing, and all my brothers. The recruits were silent. Even Mason's chest ached with a pain that wasn't his. Holloway turned to face them, his eyes wet but fierce. You kids laugh at old soldiers because you don't understand what time does to courage. But time doesn't destroy it. It just buries it under scars. He picked up one of the logs they had been carrying and placed it on his shoulder with trembling strength. This old man may limp, but every step I take carries 6 ghosts who refuse to quit. The recruits stood still, watching as their old instructor, the same man they once mocked, led them back into the waves. By the time the sun set, none of them saw Holloway as weak anymore. They saw him as what he truly was, the embodiment of everything they were trying to become. And Mason, soaked, trembling, and exhausted, whispered under his breath, if that's what a legend looks like, I want to be one too. By the 4th day of Hell Week, most of the recruits were half broken, eyes bloodshot, lips cracked from salt water, hands blistered raw. Every breath burned, every heartbeat hurt. But Chief Howland never stopped showing up, even when his limp worsened and his voice rasped from the cold. He was always there, shouting encouragement, walking among them, reminding them why they started. Pain is temporary, he told them. But quitting? That stays with you forever? The recruits had stopped seeing him as old. Now, they saw something timeless, a spirit carved from war, discipline, and loss. That morning, during a muddy endurance crawl, Mason found himself shoulder to shoulder with Holloway. The old instructor had dropped down beside them, crawling through the sludge as if he were one of them. Sir, Mason gasped. You don't have to. Holloway cut him off. You think leadership means watching? No, leadership means bleeding with your men. His face was streaked with mud, his breath heavy, but his movements, though slower, never faltered. When they finally reached the end of the crawl, Mason noticed Hale's knee had split open, blood soaking through his fatigues. "Sir, your leg." Hall brushed him off. "A scratch. Keep going." But later, when the recruits returned to base, Hale nearly collapsed. The medic rushed to him, insisting on stitches, but Hale waved him away. "Finish the day first." That evening, as the recruits sat in the mess hall, Mason and a few others approached Hale quietly. "They placed something on his table, a folded flag patch. We found this in the sand, sir," Mason said. "We thought it might mean something to you." Hale picked it up. His weathered hand trembled slightly. It was a torn Navy SEAL insignia, the same kind his fallen brothers would have worn. He looked at Mason, eyes soft. "It means everything." Then, for the first time, he smiled fully, not the stern instructor's smirk, but the kind of smile that carries warmth through sorrow. He reached into his pocket and handed Mason an old brass coin, the SEAL Trident Challenge coin. Its edges were worn smooth from years of touch. "This belonged to a man who saved my life in Fallujah," Hale said quietly. "I've carried it every day since. Now I'm giving it to you." Mason stared in disbelief. "Sir, I can't." "Yes, you can," Hale interrupted. "Because one day you'll have to carry others, the way he carried me." The room fell silent. Even the sound of clinking trays stopped. That coin wasn't just metal. It was a story, passed down through blood, battle, and brotherhood. Hal stood, saluted the recruits, and said, "You came here to become soldiers. But remember, strength fades. Honor doesn't." As he limped out, Mason clenched the coin in his palm, tears welling in his eyes. He didn't feel like a recruit anymore. He felt like part of something eternal. Graduation. Day came 2 weeks later. The recruits stood in formation under a golden morning sky. Uniforms crisp, faces hard but proud. Each one had earned not just a title, but a sense of belonging. Chief Hale stood before them, his cane planted firmly in the sand, the sea wind tugging gently at his jacket. His limp was worse now, but his voice, steady, deep, commanding, still held the same fire. "You made it," he said. "You endured what most can't, but don't mistake endurance for glory. The world doesn't owe you respect. You earn it, one sacrifice at a time." His eyes swept across the line of new SEAL candidates. And for a moment, he looked almost at peace. Then he said softly, "My brothers from Fallujah will be proud of you all." Mason swallowed hard. The weight of the coin in his pocket felt heavier than ever. After the ceremony, Hale called Mason aside. "Walk with me." They moved toward the beach. The waves shimmered under the morning light, the same waves that had once tortured them, broken them, and remade them. "Sir," Mason said quietly, "do you ever stop missing them?" "Your brothers?" Hale smiled faintly. "No, you don't stop missing them. You just learn to live in a way that would make them proud." He paused, looking out at the endless ocean. "Every wave that hits this shore, it's a reminder. The sea takes, but it also gives back. It gave me you boys." Mason's throat tightened. "Sir, we should be the ones thanking you." Hale nodded slowly, then turned to him with a distant gaze. "Promise me something, Mason. Anything, sir. When you lead, lead with heart. When you fight, fight for the man next to you. And when you see an old soldier, don't just see wrinkles and scars. See history standing in front of you." Mason's eyes burned with tears. "I will, sir." Hale smiled. "Good." He extended his hand, and Mason shook it, firm, strong, unflinching. It was a handshake that carried decades of battle and brotherhood. Then Hale said quietly, "You've got the fire, son. Keep it burning. Don't let the world turn you cold." 3 months later, Mason received a small envelope in the mail. No sender's name. Just a military stamp. Inside was a handwritten note in shaky script. "For my last class of warriors, thank you for reminding me what I fought for Chief Benjamin Hale. Navy SEAL, Ret, Fallujah survivor. Below the letter lay a single medal, the Silver Star, and a folded photo of 6 young SEALs in dusty combat gear, standing in front of a bombed-out city wall. Hale's smile was the same as ever. The news came a week later. Chief Hawley had passed away peacefully in his sleep dot at the next recruit graduation. Mason, now an instructor, stood where Hawley once did. He wore the same calm expression, carried the same coin in his pocket, and looked into the eyes of a new generation who still didn't know what real sacrifice meant. He began his speech with the same words. Hawley had once said, "Strength is nothing without endurance. Endurance is nothing without purpose." And when he looked toward the ocean, he could almost see Hawley standing there, proud, still teaching, still leading. The legend of the last living Navy SEAL from Fallujah had not ended, God, it had simply passed on to those willing to carry it. That's the end of today's story, but I hope it stays with you for a while. If something in it spoke to you, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and share your thoughts. It's your comments that keep me inspired to make the next one.